Hello team, welcome back. Welcome to the DevOps training, and today we are going to discuss about the continuous development. So let's start with. So we have already discussed the DevOps part. So DevOps is basically a software development approach which involves the continuous development, continuous testing, continuous integration, continuous deployment and continuous monitoring. And these phases will be followed throughout the development lifecycle, right? So the very first phase of the DevOps is about the continuous development. So we are going to discuss about the continuous development in this particular lecture. We have already discussed about this diagram, right? So the complete DevOps phase is basically divided in 7 stages: the plan, coding, build, and test. After the test, we integrate our tested code with our existing code and deploy it on our either the testing server or on production server. After this, we will operate that code, monitor that code, and again it's come to the bug fixes in the development. So this is the flow. The tools what we are using from the DevOps point of view in the development, we are using the Git and Subversion, right? We are also using Jira as a bug tracking tool. So basically, these are the 5 stages of the DevOps lifecycle. Very first stage is about the continuous development. The second is continuous testing. The third stage is continuous integration. Fourth one is continuous deployment, and fifth one is continuous monitoring. In this particular tutorials, we are going to discuss each and every phase in details. First, we will start with the continuous development. To understand the continuous development in detailed way, I have divided these particular DevOps lifecycle phases in the tasks. So planning and coding is the part of continuous development, right? Build and test is the part of continuous testing. After the test, we will integrate the tested build with the existing code. It's called continuous integration, and deployment and operating part comes in the continuous deployment, and monitoring part comes in the continuous monitoring. After the monitoring, we find some bugs and it again goes to the continuous development. So this is infinite loop where we are building a product and we are incorporating new features in every sprint. So we will discuss about the continuous development in details. So what is continuous development? So continuous development is a phase which involves the planning and coding of the software application functionality. You remember we have already discussed the waterfall model. In the waterfall model, there was the drawbacks like first we need to plan, then we need to code, then we need to test, then we need to maintain the code, right? Over there we have a lot of kind of documentation like we need to done the SRS, we need to done the complete requirement gathering, but this is not true with the continuous deployment, but this is not true with the DevOps phases. Here we divided the complete product in small chunks, and we will deliver the product feature wise. We are not delivering the complete product in a single release, right? So we have the planning, and we call these planning as a sprint planning, and a sprint have 2 weeks or 3 weeks duration. So basically we are delivering a part of feature or a complete feature in DevOps lifecycle in a single sprint or in a 2 sprints. So you have the very frequent releases when you are basically working with the DevOps phases. Either you have a single release every month, or you have weekly release as well. So the planning and coding is comes into the continuous development phase. We will in the sprint planning, we will plan what work we need to do in that particular sprint, and in the sprint we will do that, right? The version of the product is decided during the planning phase. So when we are basically releasing the product, so we are releasing the product in small releases. So we need to define a version of every release. Suppose you are going to release your product first time in a market, then your release will be 1.0. But after a month, you are going to release a new feature in your product, then that release would be 1.1. The next release would be 1.2, and the next release it will be 1.3 and so on, right? Code can be done in any language. It is the decision of your organization, it is the decision of your development teams, right? So we are not going to done or we are not going to decide that thing, that which language, which programming language we are going to use, because a single application can use multiple programming languages, right? It is not straight away that a single application can only use the Java or only use the PHP, right? A single application can use multiple languages for multiple tasks, but we need to maintain that code with the help of the version control system. So we will version our code which we are releasing in every sprint, right? So we will discuss about the version control system in the coming slides. Now, first we will discuss why code versioning is important. So versions are maintained to hold a single source of application. When we are doing the versions, so basically we are merging our code in our integration branch, or you can say in our application code. So suppose let's take a scenario, you are not versioning your code, right? You are just uh, created 1.0 branch on your version control system, right? And you are pushing every code in that particular branch, right? And one day you got to know that 3 days before or 4 days before we pushed some incorrect code in our production, right? So how can you roll back that particular code? So if you are using the version control system and you are versioning your code, then you need to know that which version of the build was working fine, which version of the build don't have that particular issue. So you simply roll back your code to the previous version, right? Using the centralized single source code, operations can be accessed the same code what they plan to release. So with the help of the version control system, we can use centralized code repository, right? And operations can access the same code what they plan to release, right? This is very simple. Easy to roll out the faulty snippet of the code and complete release. So if we are using versions, so as we have discussed, we simply can roll out the faulty code or we simply can roll out the complete release in an easy way. So where DevOps comes into the picture? So in the continuous development, DevOps comes into the picture when we are talking about the versioning of our code, right? The tool which we are going to use, or the we can say the most popular tool of the version control system, is Git and GitHub. So Git is a tool and GitHub is a repository. So we are going to use Git and GitHub as a version control system. The very second section of this particular course will describe all things from A to Z about the Git and GitHub. So this is the simplest diagram where I have described the distributed version control system. So on our server, we have a single repository where all my code is placed, right? Then we have the second layer of repository. This is called staging area. So when we will learn about the Git, we will learn about all these things. The second phase is called the staging area, and the third, which is a working copy on your desktop. So basically you have a working copy of the code on your desktop. You are committing your changes, or you are doing your changes, or you are pushing your changes on the staging area, and from that staging area the code are being pushed to the central repository. So this is called the distributed version control system. You can see we have the single source code in every machine of my organization, in every machine of my developer, right? So if anyone lose the code, in that case, if you lose your single repository, then you can simply push the complete code to the server. So you don't have any loss in terms of the code. We will discuss about all these things in the coming lectures when we will learn about the Git. So this is the distributed version control system where the same source of files are distributed across the systems of developers. So from the DevOps point of view, first we will learn about the Git and GitHub. That's all for this particular lecture. If you have any question related to this particular lecture, then you can ask your questions in the question and answer forum, right? Thank you guys. Thanks for your time.